And we're live here on Red Banner Radio. It is 1:01 p.m. Today is November 25th, Wednesday, November 25th. Um, and I am your host, Anthony Messina here. Started right in the nick of time, going to hit record on the podcast so we can actually get that going as well. And yes, okay, cool. It's been a little bit chaotic here today at our studios. Some plumbing issues that have kept us on our toes. Just posting here on the Twitter that we're live on YouTube and on our online audio stream. And okay, so we did post earlier today actually what we were going to be discussing, which is I think something that we're going to start doing here um, a little more frequently in order to kind of show what we're going to be discussing, basically, for lack of a better term. So one of the first things I really want to get to right out of the gates is actually a story that broke, I believe, earlier yesterday. And it is concerning, to say the least. It was about Jamal Bowman, who is a recently elected Democrat progressive from New York, one of the districts in New York. I forget exactly which one. Um, Basically, he was live on CNN yesterday, and he was he was on, I forget which show it was. Trying to pull up the story here. Okay, this is actually from RT. Um, Basically, a CNN interview on why progressives are unhappy about Joe Biden's possible cabinet picks was cut less than a minute after it began, as the guest, Jamal Bowman, pointed out that one of the candidates, Rahm Emanuel, who was the former mayor of Chicago, had covered up a murder while in office. So, we're going to eventually get a way to play clips, like video clips, possibly on air. I have to talk with some friends of mine who might be able to help me out with that. I don't really have that equipment or, quite honestly, that knowledge of how to do that. But yeah. So Jamal Bowman, he was being interviewed by one of the CNN hosts. I forget her name, and he went on to briefly talk about how Rahm Emanuel, who is one of the most horrendous Democrats that there are, um, covered up the murder of, I forget who the person's name was, who was murdered while under his watch, and basically, um, he covered it up. He didn't want to deal with it, obviously, because he doesn't give a shit about the public good or anything like that. And CNN lost his connection, even though you can watch in the video clip as he's speaking about I think he got maybe 20, 30 seconds in before they cut him off, and his connection was perfectly fine. It didn't even cut out once at all, like not even for a split second. It was a perfectly strong video and audio connection, and all of a sudden, wow, all of a sudden, they lost his connection. Huh, that's weird. And they were going to try to get him back on air. They never really did that. On Tuesday, CNN invited Jamal Bowman, a progressive New York politician who earlier this year unseated 16-term Congressman Eliot Engel, who's been a fucking useless paperweight in terms of politics, to a primary landslide victory to discuss Biden's transition and whether there was a progressive enough candidate to get his endorsement. Bowman, who is black, started saying it was incredibly alarming that they are considering a person who tried to cover up the murder of a 17-year-old black boy who was shot by a white cop, when the broadcast suddenly froze mid-sentence and was replaced with the CNN logo. Emanuel is accused of standing in the way of an investigation into the murder of Laquan McDonald. That was the black boy's name. The black teen was gunned down by a Chicago police officer in October 2014, 6 years ago, just as Emanuel was fighting an uphill battle for his second term as mayor. Only months after his re-election, a judge forced the release of dashcam footage, which became key evidence in the murder trial and conviction of the officer responsible for McDonald's death. before it's released, no charges have been made in the case. So I've heard some people explain it as this, where basically what happened was because Bowman was making an accusation. It's a completely true accusation, mind you, but because he was making an accusation of a case that's never been brought to court or whatever, that CNN didn't want to get into any legal trouble by having one of their guests claim Rahm Emanuel guilty or was taking part in covering up this murder trial. And I sort of understand what they're trying to say. I mean, because here's the thing: I work in media, right? I've worked in this field for years now, and I've worked at commercial radio stations. I've worked for Sirius XM, and I understand entirely that side of the argument where you don't want to get Rahm Emanuel or his lawyers or anyone related to that on your case because they aren't going to take too kindly to what could, I think, be considered slander or libel. One of the two, I believe, slander. But the problem is when you are lying about it and covering it up completely. What you could do instead of censoring like the little pieces of shit that you are, you can then counter the guest and say, well, is there any proof of that? Do you have any proof of Rahm Emanuel covering this up? And make him state his case. And that would be easy for Jamal Bowman because there is obvious proof of Emanuel covering up or not aiding in the investigation into the murder of Laquan McDonald. It's a perfectly easy case for Jamal Bowman to make or anyone who's done any investigation into the matter. But instead, CNN cowards and hides like the losers they are, says that they lost his connection and continues to cover for the Democrat establishment, which runs and controls not only CNN, but MSNBC, or as I like to call them, MSDNC. And that's what's going on. And the funniest thing is, um, I've heard so many people who are like, "Oh, I can't believe that they why are you freaking out? They just lost his connection." Like, how dead inside are you? How closed are your eyes? Why do you still believe the media, um, the mainstream media, that is, aren't controlled by large corporate donors and Democrat and Republican parties? I mean, and the funniest thing is this: that Fox News, which is obviously, whoa, what the hell happened there? Um, wow, that's not good. Give us 1 second, folks. We're gonna look into the matter. I'm not lying to you. I don't know what the hell just happened. Um, I will be back in one moment. Okay, we're back. Good thing that I had that. Uh, I have this cassette here on. Wow. Okay. Good. So anyway, what was I saying? Um, see, we can take things. We can deal with a couple of minor technical difficulties here and there. But what I was saying is basically that even Fox News, which is the obvious Republican GOP outlet, still has its hands in or still has people within the Democrat Party who is definitely friendly with, if not working with, Fox News and the powers that be over there. One good example is Joe Manchin, who was on recently, I think a couple weeks ago, and was basically trying to ensure Fox News viewers that no, don't worry, Nothing's going to fundamentally change. Everything's going to remain the same. Um, and yeah, that's how that was going. So absolutely horrendous what's been going on recently with CNN, and just I do have to give Jamal Bowman so much credit, and I will give Democrats credit when it's due. Um, with the amount of pressure that I know that these people are under, the most progressive members of the Democrat Party, AOC, Cory Bush, Ilhan Omar, Jamal Bowman, Jabari Brisport. I give him so much credit for having the guts to go on CNN and call out Rahm Emanuel for the bullshit, horrible individual that he is. Because he's got to understand. He's a freshman congressman. He is the newest of the new. You're the lowest on the totem pole. Um, uh, Nicholas Cage reference. But that's where he's at. That's where he's at. And he's already going out there and making obvious enemies within the Democrat Party, but he doesn't give a shit because he's going to speak truth to power. He's going to say what he's got to say, no matter who the fuck tells him not to. And I give that man so much fucking credit for doing that because that shows that he's got character, he's got a moral compass, and he knows what's right and what's wrong. And he's going to do what's right no matter what the fuck it costs his career or whatever. He doesn't give a shit. And I give him so much credit. And not only that, but he took to Twitter last night and he made a reference to the absolutely amazing Jill Scott Heron and the song "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." And I saw that tweet. Oh man, my heart melted. I was just so happy to see something like that, to see a U.S. politician legitimately being censored by CNN. And he goes and says, "The revolution will not be televised." And yeah, he's right. It won't be. It won't be whatsoever. Um, so yeah, I would say go find the clip on Twitter, or I'm sure there's a few articles. I think the RT article actually has the clip. Um, but yeah, so that is what's going on there with Jamal Bowman. The clip is right here, actually. And let me see if I can't just actually briefly play the clip over the laptop speakers and see if that works whatsoever. Oh no, that's just a screenshot of the video. God, that's stupid. Here it is. I'm an idiot. This is from Twitter. This is a clip of Jamal Bowman censored on on CNN. Oh, you know what?
Election process for Biden, and Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont had this to say. It would be, for example, enormously insulting if Biden put together a team of rivals and there's some discussion, and that's what he intends to do, which might include Republicans and conservative Democrats, but which ignore the progressive community. I think that would be very, very unfortunate, Bernie Sanders had to say. So based on Biden's elections so far, do you see anyone that's progressive enough for you?
Well, first, let me say off the top, thank you so much for having me. When I hear names like Rahm Emanuel being floated as part of Biden's cabinet, considering the fact that he covered up the murder of Laquan McDonald in Chicago, considering the fact that he closed over 50 elementary schools and 30 mental health institutions, it's incredibly alarming.
And there you go.
So we lost Congress.
So there you go. Yeah, they literally. No, you're not going to try and bring him back. Such a fucking lie. But yeah, there you go. They did not make it. They did not cover that up a single bit. They made it absolutely clear they did not want Jamal Bowman to say his piece on their program and censored him immediately. And you can even hear someone do like a snap or something when he was talking, and then they cut him off. And the host didn't even look like she was surprised at all. She was trying to, I guess, make a smooth transition, but that did not happen at all. So, That is what's going on with Jamal Bowman. This is Red Banner Radio, November 25th, Wednesday. Um, Here we go. Uh, we're going to move on to our next story, our next piece. This actually is going to be an international story. This is coming to us from Bolivia, which has recently regained its independence from a far right fascist coup attempted by our military over here in the U.S. They recently appointed a new minister to the Ministry of Cultures, Decolonization, and Depatriarchalization, which is a mouthful of a word. Is a Bolivian government ministry with the stated intention to decolonize and depatriarchalize. I believe that's how you pronounce that, and to reverse this inequity between nationalities as well as between men and women. Um, it was ordered by decree by President Evo Morales, the first indigenous president of Bolivia, in 2009. Now, the position was dissolved on the 4th of June of this year by the President Janine Áñez, a far right fascist puppet president that we installed. But after the election of Luis Arce, um, November 20th, the position was reestablished with the newly appointed Sabina Orellana Cruz. Now, my Spanish is not too hot, but I'm trying my best here with that. I think it's an incredible uh, uh, um, turn of events in Bolivia to see that they're reestablishing this position, and I think it's such an incredibly unique position to hold in politics. This is from Redfish, who actually released the article. And let me just go ahead and read this. In Bolivia, the new left wing government appointed the world's first Minister of Cultures, Decolonization, and Depatriarchalization to reflect its plurinational approach and its priorities in fighting colonialism and sexism in the country. For the position, they have sworn in Sabina Orellana Cruz, an indigenous leader, feminist, and activist of the National Confederation of Campesino, Indigenous, and Ori, origin, oh man, originary women of Bolivia. Orellana has been on the front lines of the fight for equality for women and indigenous people in Bolivia. The former Ministry of Cultures was closed after the U.S. backed coup that was led by anti-indigenous fascists, which ousted the first indigenous president of Bolivia, Evo Morales. The period during the coup saw an increase in far right and state violence against indigenous people. Bolivia has one of the highest percentages of indigenous population in Latin America. In her speech, Oleana stated that the ministry will work for a decolonized, depatriarchalized homeland, proud of its roots and its great cultural wealth. So that's some good news going on, which God knows we can certainly use that nowadays. So I would recommend actually checking that out and just checking my email. Sorry. Checking out Redfish. And the funniest thing is, Redfish made this clear. I believe this was a few months ago, where on Instagram and Facebook, because they're now owned by the same company, Facebook, it says Russian state controlled media. But does it say anything for Breitbart, the most far right fascist media still allowed on Facebook? Well, shit, it doesn't say anything about that, does it? Or any far right or right wing media on Facebook or Instagram at all. It doesn't say um, American state controlled media or whatever state controlled media at all. But for Redfish, oh, well, fucking hell. Man, that's interesting. And plus, a lot of other left wing outlets, such as Telesur, will have that little tag there beneath their name. And Facebook has made it abundantly clear that they are not remotely happy to work with or supportive of whatsoever any left wing media. And they will continue to censor that till the cows come home. But they're perfectly okay with Breitbart. So why? What the fuck? Explain this to me. Why on earth is it okay for Breitbart to exist on Facebook, but they kicked off Alex Jones? What's the difference between Breitbart and Alex Jones? Alex Jones is a little bit crazier than Breitbart, but like at that point, it's at that point you're parsing out these tiny little fractions of numbers or differences between the two. Where Alex Jones will talk about interdimensional time travel and gay frogs and things like that. But most of the time, he's just saying the same shit and selling his fucking water filter, his water filtration system. Uh, this reminds me of a meme. This was years ago. This was like 2015 or 2016. No, this must have. Yeah, this was 2016. Um, back in the good old days when the Young Turks were broadcasting from the RNC in Philadelphia, and or no, this was at the DNC. I'm sorry, they were broadcasting from the DNC, and Alex Jones infiltrated the TYT live set, right? And he was saying a bunch of shit about Hillary for prison and Bill Clinton is a rapist, and Cenk Uygur got all up in Alex Jones's face, and there was this classic meme that I think I still have saved on this very old laptop of of humble water filtration salesman assaulted by Cenk Uygur, and uh, man, those are the good old days. Not really, but I do remember them sort of fondly because you know 2015 is basically when, like, 2014, 2015 is when I started getting into leftist politics. Um, and honestly, the Young Turks is what really made me a leftist. And obviously, for quite a while, I labeled myself as a progressive. Um, but over the last 2 years, I have really embraced the term as a socialist, and certainly this year has pushed me quite far left, and I have no problem considering myself a Marxist. Um, but the Young Turks, and this is completely off topic, so entirely off topic. But the Young Turks, I still, you know, am okay with. I don't entirely, I don't, I don't, I don't really watch them much anymore. I don't really put a whole lot of, weight into what they're saying, but um, I do appreciate their work. I do appreciate the fact that they've stuck to it for like what 14 years now. I think they've been doing Young Turks, and I do think Che Uger and Anna Kasparian have their hearts in the right place. I don't watch them much because half of it is ads for their coffee and too strong coffee, and half of it's just Cenk Uygur begging people to become a member of the Young Turks because they need money. And I understand that, believe me, considering I'm doing the same thing basically that they're doing, except on a far smaller budget and a much smaller scale. But we're both new media to some degree. And it does cost a shitload of money to try and run something like this. But then I couldn't even imagine how much money it takes to do Young Turks, because he's got to pay the employees. They got to pay for the bandwidth. They got to pay for the sets and for the equipment and technical maintenance and copyrights. I'm sure they have to deal with to some degree. And of course, buying the merchandise for them to sell. It's a shitload of money. They are dealing with millions of dollars. Um, and it's incredible to see because it really did start off, and I believe Cenk Uyghur's living room. Um, and so I give him a lot of credit, and I give him credit for telling MSNBC to go fuck themselves. And he stuck to his politics. And he believed in his mission, and here he is. Um, And if it wasn't for the Young Turks, we wouldn't get talent like Kyle Kalinske, who personally I watch Secular Talk a lot more because he doesn't advertise anything at all. And I like his style a lot more. Like I said, he's basically what influenced me to actually try and do something like this. Even though I know it's going to take weeks and months and years of constant dedication to this to really get this off the ground. And like I said, at the end of the day, my end game with this is for this show to become a nationally syndicated radio program because of the fact that, and the next story that we're going to talk about, I heard from local shitty fucking radio, and I make no bones about it. I love radio a lot more than I do like video media. That's why the webcam isn't really a huge deal to me. It's not something that I care about too much. I got a face for radio. So, uh, um, I understand that um, radio today, especially talk radio and news radio, is almost entirely far right. I mean, you have some of the most disgusting fucking people saying the most horrible anti Semitic, transphobic, homophobic, Islamophobic shit, and it's totally okay. The FCC is totally fucking okay with Rush Limbaugh and Mark Levin and Michael Savage pushing literal anti Semitic propaganda and conspiracy theories on a daily basis on air, and that's okay. That's totally okay. But China wants to have China International Radio, China Radio International. I'm sorry, have a few stations in America, and that causes up a whole fucking storm. Oh my God, it's communist propaganda! Holy shit! Um, you might be asking yourself, what are you talking about? Anthony? China has radio stations in America. Yeah, I don't know how many of them are left, but at a time, I think there was like 8 or 9 different stations in the country. One of them was right here in Philadelphia. The old 1540 WNWR used to be a simulcast of China Radio International, which is basically China's state-owned international radio network. They have a network of shortwave radio transmitters that broadcast all around the world on shortwave frequencies, and they have a lot of medium wave, or as we call it here, AM radio stations all across the world. And they broadcast in English or whatever. If they're in Mexico, they might have the Spanish network, or France might have like a French network, and it's basically it's basically their news programs and cultural programs and like a morning show or an evening show. Um, and I would listen to it from time and again, and it's mostly pretty boring to be quite honest. But it's not communist propaganda. They literally never once say like you should become a member of the Chinese Communist Party. Even though if they wanted to say that, I'd be okay with that. Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? Now you might ask yourself, well, why do you draw the line at anti-Semitic propaganda, but it's okay if they want to say you should become a member of the Chinese Communist Party because communism killed X amount of people and Chairman Mao and all that. Two things. First off, fuck you for even trying to say that we should allow anti-Semitism on the radio. But if you want to say join the Communist Party of China or the Chinese Communist Party, I think it's the Chinese Communist Party. I am perfectly okay with that because, I don't believe that they ever tried to erase an entire race of people off the face of the earth. They didn't. They never tried that. Now, you might be saying to yourself, what about the Uyghurs and all that? And that is a very good point. I've heard a lot of sides of that story, and it's disheartening to say the very least. And obviously, because China is a state atheist nation, they're not going to take kindly to Islamic religious traditions. I disagree with that entirely. I think very much so you should be able to believe in whatever the fuck you want as long as you're not hurting anyone else. Which means, if inside your own home you want to have Nazi flags and Hitler propaganda inside your home on your own property, have at it. you're a fucking asshole, and you're gonna get whatever comes to you if you walk down the street with a fucking swastika on your arm. If you get the shit kicked out of you, I'm not gonna shed a tear because that's the consequences of your actions, right? And so I don't think for a minute that China should be trying to go around and control what people believe in terms of religious faith. I understand that their argument is, well, it's going against our communist revolution, and we want to protect our revolution, just as we here in America protect our 1776 revolution. What's really the difference? What's really the difference? But that's way too much of a difficult conversation for people to attempt to have. And I understand that, but oh my god, we'd be here for 5 fucking hours trying to talk about that. I'm not really going to try and get into that right now. That's a very um that's a hefty conversation to have. That's quite a hefty conversation to have, and that's for another day. Um, it is 1:30 here on Red Banner Radio. It's Wednesday, November 25th. I'm your host, Anthony Messina. Again, this is our third episode. We're starting to get into a little bit of a flow here. It's going to take weeks to really patent down this format and exactly how I want it to flow, and what works and what doesn't. But we're starting to enter the stage where we're getting to hopefully a regular pattern of things. And I want to let you know that I really do want to have interviews on the program. I want to interview um, other socialist revolutionaries on the program. I'd love to interview people from the PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I want to get black and brown voices on the show, and women voices, and members from the LGBT community on here, because that is the whole game. That idea of uplifting those voices who might not have access to start something like this. I'm unbelievably privileged to already have this equipment in the first place because I run my own radio station, music station. And so I legitimately have the mixer over here, and I have the headphones and the laptop and the internet and the microphone, the audio processor up there, and a cassette deck for the music. I literally use a fucking cassette deck for the theme song here. Um, and I want to be able to use this for the betterment of not just myself and our mission together as socialists for Medicare for all and for a Green New Deal, but for other voices who might not have access to the same things, and give them a time to say their piece, and give them a platform for what they want to say and what they want to push in their agenda, because that's incredibly important. And at the end of the day, my good friend Ben, a fellow comrade, um, said it very clearly that if there is going to be socialism or some form of socialism or a socialist revolution in this country, it's going to and has to be led by black and brown people and a vanguard socialist party. Or else it's not really going to be a successful proletariat socialist revolution, but really, quite frankly, a bourgeois revolution. Just like ours was in 1776. I mean, think about it. If you have a system of government such as we do here, which is steeped and entirely based in patriarchy, and quite frankly in white supremacy and capitalism, and then you simply just replace capitalism with a socialist economy, but it's still being mostly led by entirely white men, then you're not really making much of a change for the working class and for the oppressed peoples in this country. And I said this on day one. I've said this 1,000 times before we even started Red Banner Radio. My friends who know me know I've said this 1,000 times. But class and race go hand in hand. And so, if we're all as socialists fighting for the liberation of the working class as a whole, but you still have a class of black people and brown people and immigrants, and different minority groups, religious groups, different minority religious groups. If they're still oppressed and they're obviously in the working class, then you won't be able to liberate the entire working class without them. Because if one person's oppressed, then we're all oppressed. I don't remember who said that first, but it's entirely true. It's entirely true. And so the very first thing that we have to work on, especially as my white listeners such as myself, we have the most responsibility to liberate black and brown and indigenous people in this country, so then we can liberate the entire working class, all the white working class, and everyone else, everyone in the proletariat, everyone who is not rich, everyone who's not a millionaire or a billionaire. And that's a huge mission, but that has to be seen through to the bitter end before we try and actually, create a socialist government in this country. Because if we don't do that, and then we just keep electing other socialists or white socialists, or even people like Ocasio Cortez, even if we elect a bunch of them to our current government, that won't be a socialist revolution. It'll just mean that we have a couple of socialists or social democrats in our government. But I promise you that we will still have a million different cases of a single black mother trying to raise a couple of children, working a bunch of jobs, and still barely, if at all, making ends meet. We will still have indigenous people who won't have any right to self-governance on the land that they were here 1,000 years before. And we'll talk about Thanksgiving coming up in a minute. But 1,000 years before the white man came on these shores and stole their fucking land and committed a genocide against the indigenous people. And at the end of the day, I fully fucking believe and am committed to not only giving their land back and for them to govern it however they fucking want to, but reparations for what we did to them, and reparations for every black person in this country, every African American in this country. Regardless of the fucking argument that I hear from right wing pundits all the fucking time, is that, oh, well, slavery was 400 years ago. I don't give a shit. We have the money to create a fucking space force, but you're telling me that we can't afford to pay reparations to them? You're telling me with the largest military budget in the world that is basically only used to protect oil, that we can't cut that by even 25%? Do you know how much 25% of our military budget is? That is billions and billions of dollars. Billions of dollars that we could use to not only pay reparations to black and indigenous people in this country, but to create a single payer Medicare for all system, to afford to send every single person in this country to a free 4-year college so they can get a degree, so they can get a good paying job in this country, maybe, and to afford to pay a universal basic income so that we can afford to pay everyone to stay at home during COVID so that we can hopefully cut this virus short. But we won't do that. We won't do that. And you want to know why? Because that would be the right thing to do. And America does not like to do the right thing. We like to do the thing that fattens the fucking pockets of the people who not only run this country, but run the entire fucking world. The global capitalist elite, the businessmen, the CEOs, heads of the military, heads of big pharma corporations. That's who runs the world. That's who controls what you and I think, do, and say. Or at least they try to. Doesn't really work out that well because, freedom. Freedom! Rock, flag, and eagle. Anyway, so obviously tomorrow is Thanksgiving. This comes to us from the Cornell Daily Sun. Now, here's the thing about this story that we're going to do. I heard this first discussed on a local talk station here in our area, 1210 a.m. WPHT. It's a conservative talk radio station, just as pretty much all the conservative talk radio stations are. And the host and their guest hosts were talking about this because they're like, huh, these fucking liberals, and and they were basically like, haha, these fucking snowflake libtards are going on about decolonizing your Thanksgiving dinner. How fucking stupid. Trump 2020. And they were completely and they were completely dismissing whatever argument this article was trying to make, and they're just like, haha, libtard say funny thing that I don't understand. And that was basically the end of their discussion. So I was like, why'd you cover the story in the first fucking place? Oh, I know, because it was an easy zinger for those 90-year-old Republican radio listeners of yours saying, like, oh, goodness gracious, I can't believe they're trying to get rid of Thanksgiving. So let me read to you the actual article and why this author is entirely fucking correct on everything she said. But of course, you and I know that because we have a brain between our ears that still functions every now and again, unlike the fucking Republicans on the radio. This is called Decolonize Your Thanksgiving Dinner, written by Sadie Groberg. I believe she's a professor at Cornell. This is from the Cornell Daily Sun. And here we go. As we wrap up semifinals and transition to break, most students seem excited to go home and celebrate Thanksgiving. By the way, this was written 2 days ago. For many Cornellians, yeah, I believe this is from Cornell University, this holiday is an opportunity to catch up with loved ones and express what we're grateful for. However, it's important to recognize the origins of our traditions and critically examine the history that we teach. And I remember that the schmuck on the radio was already like, well, what do we have to examine our history? What Pilgrim come in Indian and they were happy and that's how it went. No, you fucking dope. Many American students are still taught the story of Thanksgiving as a peaceful event that celebrated the unity between Pilgrims and Native Americans. However, this is far from the truth. The first mention of Thanksgiving was a celebration by white colonialists after their massacre of 700 Pequot. Pequot. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to pronounce that. Pequot. I believe that's Pequot. No part of the colonial Thanksgiving was intended to actually include Native Americans. No, it wasn't at all. And I can't believe the fact at how many millions and millions and millions of Americans um, actually think that the first Thanksgiving in 1619 was actually this big gigantic feast that the Pilgrims shared with the Native Americans. You think that's what happened? No, 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 no. They had the Native Americans pick all the fucking food for the white men to eat, and they were lucky to get scraps, if that. Despite this understanding, sorry, no part of the colonial Thanksgiving was intended to actually include Native Americans, and the supposed promise of unity has been non existent. Despite this understanding, or really lack thereof, people still celebrate Thanksgiving because of the opportunity to come together with friends and family. And let me set the record straight. I don't give a shit about that. I love Thanksgiving. I love a good feast. I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm going to celebrate Thanksgiving tomorrow with my family at my home here because I'm not going to travel like a fucking idiot. But I typically during a regular year we'd go down to my aunt down in Washington D.C. And I love it. I love that tradition. I love the drive down there with my dad, and I love the food and seeing my cousins the only time of the year I do, and I enjoy that a lot. But it's important to read further and understand exactly what is going on here. There are over 5 million Native Americans in the United States, with cultures and traditions as diverse as New York City. So there is no way to speak for all of them when deciding how to act on this day. However, being critical of the United States history as well as that of the land you're living on are both ways to add more thanks to Thanksgiving. For many of us, our celebrations will look different this year due to COVID. Why not take this opportunity to introduce some new traditions? Decolonizing your dinner table might be easier than you think. Recognize the origins of the land that you live on. A Canadian organization called Native Land provides an easy resource to figure out who originally lived where you do now. If you text your zip code to 907-312-5085, you will receive a reply with the names of the native groups that originally lived on your land. This is an extremely simple way to do a little research about your hometown and its history. That's extremely interesting. Um, Understand the history of your favorite foods. The most fruitful agricultural lands have always been indigenous territories, and many crops are modeled after Native American agricultural practices. In fact, the majority of Thanksgiving foods are centered around ingredients that are native to North America. One of the most significant examples of this are the three sisters, Kimberly Fuqua, president of the Indigenous Graduate Student Association, is from this Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. In an email exchange, Fuqua said that the three sisters were crucial to the survival of many native tribes in sharing indigenous plant patterns and recipes with colonists, allowed for them to prosper as well. She highlighted corn as a particularly important crop as the kernels were eaten and the husk can be used for baskets and moccasins. I mean, corn, originally I believe just called maize, is one of the most ancient crops anywhere in the world. It is older than the Native Americans themselves. It is millions of years old. And it's used by, I believe it was even used by the by the Aztecs and Hispanic groups. So everyone around here is using it. Cornbread has cornbread, green bean casserole, and cranberry sauce are all made from foods that have been eaten in North America for generations by Native Americans. A simple Google search can show you what remedies and other purposes different foods can be used for. You can even use the information from the Native Land Bot to research foods that are significant to the land you live on. Follow along with indigenous movements. Celebrating Thanksgiving is a positive act, but it should be partnered with an understanding of the sufferings of Native Americans. Smallpox, genocide, and the Indian Removal Act. We literally passed a fucking law called the Indian Removal. And you're still telling me that I'm the fucking idiot for talking about this? I forget the name of the host on WPHD, but I ought to write that prick a fucking email because it absolutely is shocking and abysmal. It's not shocking, but it's just fucking abysmal and depressing that we still have these idiots, these dopes with absolutely zero moral compass, zero compassion, zero attempt to understand the other side, and they're the fucking assholes who say they're the patriots, they're the intelligent ones, and you and me are the idiots. Really? You world fucking completely figured out. You think you have everything figured out and you know all the sides and you've come to the right conclusion. Fuck the Indians. Who cares, right? Fuck them. And fuck anyone for trying to understand. Maybe we should hear them out. Just maybe. Considering the fact that we literally committed a genocide and that unfortunately we're lucky that there's 5 million of them left in this country. We're lucky because much like the buffalo that we pretty much entirely wiped off the face of this country, we got pretty damn close to doing that with them too. Because no, there was never a single point in history ever when any of the fucking imperialists who came to this country, the white people who came to this country, ever tried to understand or hear them out. What we did like to do was infect them with smallpox or just fucking shoot them. That's the history of Thanksgiving. That's the history. Why would you expect, or why would I expect, or anyone expect, that the white imperialist history written in the textbooks would give an accurate representation of what happened? Because if we ever actually found out what happened with the Native Americans, well then shit. Maybe America isn't the greatest nation on earth. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Woo. Sound the alarms. Sound the alarms. That's what would happen. The veil would be entirely broken. Entirely broken. Because it took a very long time, and in some states in this country, they still don't accurately teach slavery in the history of black Americans. But heaven forbid you said the same thing about the indigenous people who we killed even more of, perhaps. I don't know the exact numbers, but I'd venture to say we probably killed more Native Americans than we have Black Americans. But I don't know. I could be entirely wrong with that. Sorry for that. I just get so pissed off about this. I really do. I really do, because I genuinely fucking care so much about the information that is being fed to people in this country. And just the sheer snottiness and the gut bursting laughter that these absolute simpletons on the radio were having about this article, which is the most common sense run of the mill article you could possibly read. She's not even lambasting or yelling at people for disagreeing with her. She's just like, hey, maybe you should do this. I don't know, maybe you should do this. And they're just like, and that's their argument. That's what they're feeding. And thousands and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people would hear that and say, yeah, red, white, and blue. Go fuck yourself, man. Go fuck yourself. These people, they're allowed on a 50,000 watt radio station making that stupid ass argument. And yet me, yeah, I know I'd have to not curse on the radio, but yeah. This is the wacky left of dial radical Marxist. I mean, I am, but like, am I really saying? And when you cut the cursing out and the yelling and the rambunctiousness of the show, my core arguments are simply that, hey, just because the history that we have in this country is horrendous doesn't mean that we can't make reparations financially or otherwise and change the course of our history so that going forward we can be a more equitable and just society. That's all I'm trying to say. And that's why I say it with such passion, because I believe it. We can change for the better. Of course we can. Everyone can. Everyone can. And that's all I'm trying to say with America. That we can, if we work and we understand and have a reconciling with ourselves, and everyone here in this country would have to do so, that we can eventually be the city on a shining hill to show the rest of the world as an example, saying, hey, we can all work and live together in peace and harmony, and everyone can have their needs met when we spend our money properly instead of investing it in a bloated military budget that we only use to go around and drone strike brown people and take their oil. That's what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to. That if we spend our money wisely, if we make proper investments, and if we teach actual hard evidence history and not sugarcoat it and not have a bias towards America and stop with this fucking lie of American exceptionalism, then maybe one day we can be the exception to the rule. We can be an exceptional society and say, wow, they're actually committed to working and living together in peace and having a real justice system that provides actual non-biased justice and getting rid and rooting out white supremacy. That's why I talk about this, and that's why I say it with such passion. Okay, finishing the article. Smallpox, genocide, and the Indian Removal Act are reasons that the curriculum needs to be changed in America to fit the narrative of all people, especially indigenous people, because knowledge is power. College students have a lot of power over the knowledge that they internalize. Cornell's Akhe Khan, was the nation's first university residence hall intended to celebrate Native Americans. They often host events that focus on culture and education, mostly over Zoom this year. Additionally, NAISAC is an awareness forum for undergraduate students on campus. I don't know what the hell that actually stands for. Native American student organizations at Cornell. Both of these organizations are active on Instagram at AquaCon and at Cornell NAISAC. Following these campus groups and getting involved are great ways to stay involved with indigenous groups, especially once Thanksgiving is past. Food is one of the most unifying forces of our culture, of any culture, to be quite honest. In this crazy day and age, it's more important than ever to appreciate the opportunity to sit down with our family and friends and enjoy a meal. Be thankful for your blessings, but enjoy them with a grain of salt, understanding that there is a brutal reality behind them all. And that is entirely true. I'll share this article on our Red Banner at Twitter, Red Banner Radio on Twitter, and hopefully you'll get some understanding um, behind the fact that the Thanksgiving that we know of is entirely a lie, is entirely a joke. But that idea of people working together in harmony, completely crossing the cultures and getting to that piece that getting to a point in history where we can all just be humans existing and working together, loving each other, and in such a harmonious way. And to so many people, that sounds like I'm talking about a utopia. And yeah, maybe I am, but that's worth fighting for. That's worth dying for. That idea of a utopia is worth dying for at the end of the day. Because if we're just going to sit here in complacency and say that, well, it is what it is, and kind of give up and just say, fuck it, who really cares? Why should we try to fight for something that is an idea that's larger than life? Then we're not going to ever progress as a race, as humans in general, as a species. We're never going to progress if we don't fight for something that is that high in the sky idea. And that's what Thanksgiving really comes down to. And so enjoy it tomorrow. Absolutely enjoy it. But understand that the history of Native Americans in this country is a history of um, the white indigenous, the white settlers committing a genocide against them. At the end of the day, we never once for a fucking minute ever tried to understand their culture. All we did was appropriate their culture after we killed off most of them because we didn't want them here because we believed, because of white supremacy, that we were superior to them and that it's totally okay for us to try and get and kill them because we believed that we were in the rights. So that is Red Banner Radio for today, November 25th, Wednesday. We will be live tomorrow, 1 to 2 p.m. on Thanksgiving. And this will be up on our Spotify later on for the podcast version. This live video stream will be also on there. Again, you can find us on Twitter at Red Banner Radio. Share this with everyone that you know, and continue to help and grow the only Marxist radio show, daily radio show, news and commentary from a Marxist socialist perspective. Um, and thank you for viewing. And until next time, until tomorrow, take care. Enjoy also. Happy Thanksgiving.